Our topic for today is development of linguistic skill of writing. We see that all the stress in our examination system is on writing. Even then, our students are not good at writing skill. What to talk about listening, speaking and reading, whereas all the stress is being given on writing, even then we find that they are lacking in this ability. So, we will discuss what do we mean by mechanics of teaching writing and what are the characteristics of good handwriting and why there is retardation in the habit of students, why they are lacking this habit and what a teacher can do, how a teacher can contribute in developing this writing skills among students, how we can make them able to write good notice, good articles and good diary and other writing, creative writing skills. So, friends, let us start with what do we mean by writing. So, in the beginning, we will discuss what is the meaning of writing. Learning to read and writing is a process of experiencing language. Children learn to talk in a language of participating in communicative interactions, meaning by if we want that our students can learn to read and to write, then we will have to give them some good experiences where they can communicate, where they can interact. Once a child has begun to communicate orally in a language, writing can be introduced. By the time we know very well that there are 4 linguistic skills: first listening, speaking, reading and then writing. All the writing skills or reading skills or listening skills or speaking skills, all these skills are interrelated, but we have given them sequencing. First comes the learning, then speaking, then reading and then writing. I was speaking to you that all this stress in our education system is on writing. Even then we find that our students are lacking this skill. So, what we can do, we will be discussing. Writing is the physical expression of what you think. What we write, because our pen is trying to coordinate with our thoughts. So, what we think, we try to give them expression, we try to write. The close relationship between writing and thinking makes writing valuable. Whatever comes in our mind, whatever we think, whatever reasoning process or thinking process or logical process is going on in our mind, we try to pen down. So, we can say very well that there is a close relationship between writing and thinking, and this close relationship is what we mean by writing. This writing is closely related to the inner processes within a child's mind. I mean to say, in the mind of a child, in the mind of an individual, some processes, some thinking process, some reasoning process is going on, and that process, when one is penned down, then it takes the form of writing. Writing is a useful means of organizing thoughts and giving expression. How do we know that Vikramaditya was a judicious king? Because we have read in our books. So, writing is a useful means of transferring the knowledge from one generation to another generation. So, writing is a skill. It gives expression to our thoughts and it is very important. According to Harold Rosen, the writer is a lonely figure. He or she writes with one hand tied behind his or her back. Being robbed of gestures, he or she is robbed too of the tone of his or her voice. He is condemned to monologue. There is no one to help out, to fill the silences, put words in his mouth or make encouraging noises, meaning by one has to make the use of punctuation marks so that the idea is clear, because the writer or the author is robbed of the tone or the gestures. So, we can say that the writer has to make use of punctuation mark and the verb and the agreement of the closer and other grammar portions we will be discussing on in our coming session. Then After the meaning of writing skill, I would like to discuss with you what are the aspects of writing skill. There are various aspects. First aspect is the syntax. What do we include in syntax? In syntax, first comes the sentence structure and then choices of the structure, because when a student, when an individual is trying to learn the language, particularly here we are talking in context of English language and we are not the native speakers of English language. So, it becomes essential that a learner must know what are the structure in the sentences and what is the choice of structure. And then after this syntax, the second part is the content. And in content we include basically four things. First is the relevance, that the content should have a relevance. Then it should have a clarity. We include on the second number that the idea must be clear. Then originality, we give weightage to the original ideas. Then the fourth in the content is the logic, that the ideas or the expression which we write, which anyone write, it must have some logic. And the next aspect is the grammar, because first we have to learn the grammar portion. So, in the grammar portion, one learner has to learn the rules for verbs. What are the rules which counts in the agreement of the use of the verbs and articles and adjective and pronoun and so on, various grammar portions. Then the next aspect is the writing process. How the writing process start, because I was speaking to you just a few minutes back that what we think, that thinking takes the form of our writing. So, in writing processes there comes first the getting ideas. How do we get the ideas? I would like to relate this writing skill to the reading skill. Unless we read, we cannot write. So, all these skills are related. Writing is related to reading also. If we do not read, we cannot write. So, how do we get the ideas? When we read. Then getting started, then our mind start thinking, then we start writing the drafts. Then after drafting the writing content, then one tries to revise, that is the afterward step of the drafting. Then the next aspect is the mechanics. What do we include in mechanics? Mechanics of handwriting. How do we write? How new or the beginner or a learner starts writing? How to hold the pen and what should be the posture and how to start with the different aspects. And then the spellings. If I talk about spellings, once the mistakes or the errors are committed on the part of the learner, it is very difficult to remove in the remedial classes. So, it is my sincere suggestion that in the beginning the learner has to be very peculiar about the spellings. Then the punctuation marks, as I was talking to you that writer is robbed of the tone and the gestures. So, punctuation marks are very important. Then the next aspect is the audience or the readers. One has to see for whom I am writing. So, we have to keep in mind our target group. So, for whom we are writing, that is important. Then the organization. After the thinking process is going on in the mind and we try to pen down that process. So, we have to be careful in organizing those ideas which are going on in our mind. Then the next aspect is the word choice, because word there has their own unique importance. So, which vocabulary, which idioms and which tone has to be used. Then the purpose. Purpose is very important. The reason for writing, for what purpose we are writing, whether we are writing something to our friend or we are writing for some official purpose or we are writing for some job purpose. So, purpose is very important when we start start writing. So, these are the various aspects of writing. After discussing the various aspects of the writing, let us discuss what do we mean by mechanics of writing. What do we include in mechanics? When we talk about the mechanics of writing, it includes various things like first is the making letters of right shape and size. When we start teaching to the beginners about the language, so when they start writing, it's our foremost duty to tell them how to make the letters, because they should be of the right shape and the right size. It should be of genuine one. Then the giving proper spacing between letters, words and lines. They should have very genuine spacing between the letters and between words to words and between lines to lines on a page. It should be very proper and genuine. Then we include using capital letters and other punctuation marks. In writing, the punctuation marks is really very important, because if simply we make a statement that we say that John is a very good singer, after this statement if we put question mark or sign of exclamation or full stop or comma, the punctuation mark will change the meaning of the sentence. So, here punctuation marks are very important. Then controlling the small muscles of the fingers and wrist to have fluent movement in writing. I will be discussing with you why some of the students have good handwriting and some do not have. In the beginning, our primary teacher who is teaching us at beginning level or the junior level has very important role to play, because in the beginning our movement of the fingers and wrist is very important. The child will start writing must have a proper space and must have a proper posture while starting writing, because once a child start using or a wrong posture or a wrong pen or the nib, then it will be very difficult for that learner. I am not saying that it is impossible, but it becomes difficult. So, in the beginning the right things should be taught to the learners. Then if I talk to you what are the characteristics of good handwriting, because I am stressing on this that a child must have a good handwriting. So, I would like to discuss with you what are the good characteristics of good handwriting. First is the legibility, distinctiveness, spacing, simplicity, size, letter style, uniformity, speed, adjustment between writing and thinking. Now, I will be discussing to you one by one. First is the legibility. Each and every word should be legible, it should be easy to read. If anyone's writing is illegible, then it gives a good it does not give a good impression to the reader, rather it gives a bad impression. So, first characteristics of good handwriting is legibility. Then the distinctiveness. What do we mean by distinctiveness? Means each letter in a word and each word in a line should have its own distinctive form. The words or the letters should not be distorted or they should not be overlapped. Sometimes it happens when we mark the answer sheets. If there is a confusion in the mind of the students that there will come E or I, what they do, they try to play clever and they just make the overlapping of E and I. So, it should not be there. Each letter in a word should have its distinctive form. Then the spacing. There should be a proper spacing each letter and each word and each line, and moreover it should have a uniform spacing. Then simplicity. What do we mean by simplicity in handwriting? Sometimes some students have a tendency, some writers have a tendency to put unnecessary loops and tails and curves in giving or in decorating the words. So, it is not suggested. Words should be in their simple form so that it is legible to read, because when there is no legibility in the writing, it sometimes irritates the reader, and that is not a good gesture, because it leaves a bad impression on the mind of the reader. So, our words should be simple. Then next characteristics of good handwriting, I would talk about size. They should be of genuine size. They should not be very small and they should not be of very big, because letter style is also important. If some writers, they have a tendency to make the letter in a forward slant, some have a backward slant, and some write in a erect slant. But we as a teacher educator, we as a teacher suggest that that letter should be written in erect position, not the backward and not the forward. Then using capital letters and other punctuation marks, that is also very important. To the beginners, we must tell where to use the capital letters and where to use the punctuation marks, and what is the importance of using punctuation marks, because I spoke to you just now that punctuation marks are very important because they make the sense clear. Then controlling the small muscles of the fingers and wrist to have fluent movement in writing. Sometimes it has been noticed that when children start writing, they do not get proper space, and they do not get the space to make movement in writing. Then they start writing in a bad style, and it becomes their habit. Then further making letters of right shape. After that, I will take F.G. French statement. He has suggested that training in writing should begin with training in muscular control through fairly large movement using fingers in tray of sand or chalk or brown paper. What does Mr. F.G. French mean by this? It means he was of the viewpoint that in the beginning, the children must be given freedom. What do they want to write? Give them freedom, because further we will be telling them that what are the different kind of script. When we talk about the choice of script, then I will say that there is two kind of script, that is the print script and the cursive script. If we talk about print script, what do we mean by print script? It is the type of writing which pupils come across in their textbooks. The letters in this script are not joined together and is thus easier to learn. The common practice is to start with print script. When we start teaching writing to the beginners, we ask them to go through the print script where the words are in their distinctive form and they are not joined, because when we teach the students at the beginning stage, we suggest them to go through the print script, because it is easy for the beginners to go through with the print script. Then further, the second type is the cursive script. Cursive writing is the running type of writing in which the letter in a word are joined together with strokes or loops. It is better to help the students to write in cursive manner if we want our students to write at a good speed. See, on one side we say that in the beginning it should be on the basis of print script, but if we do not proceed to the cursive writing, they will be having difficulty. Now, after discussing the types of script, I would like to discuss with you what are the general considerations to be kept while teaching writing, because by the time we are clear that there are two types of script. but when we start teaching writing to the beginners, of course we will be talking why there is the retardation in the writing skill of the students and why they are not able to write down the simple notices and diary and other things, why they are lacking in the writing skill of creative writing. We will be discussing, but before that I would like to discuss with you what are the general considerations to be kept while teaching writing. First, earlier to this also we were talking about the script. We know that there are two type of script, print script and cursive script. So, first we have to keep in mind what would be our choice of script. So, before we decide the script, we have to see for whom we are selecting the script and for whom we are selecting the style, for whom we are selecting the writing material and for whom we are selecting or we are bothering about the posture. We will be talking one by one. Choice of script. Teacher must decide print script or cursive script to be introduced at which stage. Before we decide that which type of script we have to see the level of the learners. From where the learner has started. So, we have to see what is the level or the stage of the learner. According to that, we will decide whether to select the print script or the cursive script. Then after the script, if we talk about the choice of style, the style of writing, namely vertical, forward and backward, slant vary from individual to individual. Who is writing in a vertical form and who is writing in a forward or backward, it vary from individual to individual. And why and how it varies? Because when the beginners has started writing, which style of writing one has started following, vertical, forward and backward. Whereas I have spoken to you that always vertical is suggested. So, when a learner or a beginner has started in writing forward style or backward, once and there only individual should be corrected that one must start in a writing in a vertical style, but the letters should have uniform style. If anyone has started following the forward or backward slant, it's fine, but that individual have to be very careful that all the letters, all the words and all the lines should have uniformity in the same style. Then when after this style and script, I am talking to you about the writing material. Material is to be provided which makes for the desired movement of the muscles involved in writing. Broader surface should be provided first, which consist of free lines, strokes, curves and circles. In the beginning, leave the learners or the writer free, give them pen or pencil and give paper and whatever surface, leave them free, whatever they scribbling exercises they start, stroke, a curve or circles. Do not give so many foundations on the writer in the beginning. So, this material has to be provided and give them space so that their muscles can move in a proper space. Then further the poster is also very important, like style and script and the material. When the children are writing, when they are at their desk, they should sit comfortably in their seats in erect position. Both feet should rest on the ground, because if I remind you with the memory, our backbone is directly connected with our memory. If we are not sitting in a straight position, then memory will be less. And so, when we start writing, we have to check that our students, our learners, our beginners, our children and students, they must sit in a erect position and do not allow them to sit in a different position. Their both feet should rest on the ground, and we have to check that their pen should be holded by them in a proper position. I will talk to you about the position of the pen, holding of the pen also. Then some other techniques. For the beginners, we use the technique that is overwriting, that is our calligraphy notebook. We can give dots and we can ask the beginners by start overwriting. Then use of chalkboard. We can write something on the chalkboard and we can ask the students to come forward and just make it dark. Then we can use the flashcards by showing some exercises, some words on the flashcards we can show to the students, and we can ask them that the same word, same letter you have to draw, or same circle or whatever figure we have drawn on the chalkboard or on the flashcard, we can ask the students to imitate that thing. Then this technique will be helpful to develop interest or inculcate interest in the learners to start writing. Then copying the written lines. Sometime a teacher or the any person who is teaching this writing skill to the beginners can ask the learners to copy the written lines by using the substitution table. When we were discussing with you grammar, I spoke to you that substitution table is of maximum use in the guided composition, whereas letter writing is of immense value in the free composition. We have already discussed this. So these are some techniques which a teacher can use for the beginners. Then what are the defects of handwriting? When we have talked about good characteristics of good handwriting, so what are the flaws? How and why our students develop some of the errors? What are the defects of handwriting? And side by side, I will be discussing with you what are the causes behind that defect, so that we can find how that remedy for that defect and cause can be find out. So first defect of handwriting is too much slant. Sometime too much slant is followed by the writer. What are the causes behind too much slant? First is that writing too near the body, because furniture, our table and chair is not proper and the distance is not proper or genuine with the body. So sometime we hold the paper too near with our body, then too much slant will come there in the writing. And other reason behind this too much slant is thumb not mobile enough. Sometime a child hold the pen in an inappropriate position, then thumb is not mobile, then point of the nib too far from fingers, that is again holding of the pen. Once wrong position or wrong habit is developed or taken or started by the learner, it is very difficult to change that habit. So habit formation is must in the beginning. Then paper in the wrong position, that stroke in the wrong position, whereas I spoke to you that unnecessary tail, loops and strokes should be avoided, because one has to write simple, because we have to go for simplicity of the letters, simplicity of the words. When we use unnecessary strokes, it becomes illegible, and illegible writing sometimes irritates the reader because it is not clear. So if we want that our writing should be clear to the readers, we should avoid unnecessary stroke in the wrong direction. Then the second defect is writing too heavy. What do we mean by it? What are the causes? Sometimes what happens when a child in the beginning is not guided properly, index finger pressing too heavy. Sometimes when we hold the pen, what happens that index finger press too heavily and using the wrong pen. Our pen should be proper and pen holder too small in diameter. We have to be very careful if we have to avoid that too heavy writing. Then another defect is writing too light. How it starts, there are different causes behind it. First is pen hold too obliquely or too straight. We do not have to hold our pen in a very straight position, we have to give it a somewhat slant position. And then eyelet of the pen turns sideways, it should be in rack position. We have to teach to the beginners how to hold the pen, what should be its diameter, and pen holder too large in diameter. If it is too large, then it will write too light. So one has to be careful, and teacher can contribute a lot in making the students writing a good handwriting. So if our teacher is very particular at beginning stage, our writing will be good. We owe a grade to teachers for good handwriting. Then writing too angular. Why this defect come? It has its own causes behind it. When thumbs too stiff, our thumb should be in a mobile position, it should not be too stiff. Pen holder too lightly held. If our grip is very light, then it can slip from our fingers, then movement too slow, and our movement will be too slow, then our writing will be too angular, and it is a great defect in our writing. Then another defect is writing too irregular. Why? Because it has its own causes. Lack of freedom of movement. There should be a proper space in writing. So we have to be very careful when we see that our students or the writer is sitting that position, that space should be enough. Movement of hand too slow. If the children or the writers, they are sitting too closely, then hand movement will be too slow, and pen gripping is not proper. Then incorrect or uncomfortable position. When one starts writing, position should be comfortable. We should not we have to be very careful that the writer or the children, they should not sit in an uncomfortable position. There must be spacing. Then spacing too wide, because when I spoke to you about the characteristics, I spoke to you about genuine spacing between the letters, between the words, and between the lines. So when there is wide spacing, it has its own defect, it has its own causes. What are the causes? Pen progresses too fast to write and too much lateral position. So our position should be genuine enough. So when we have seen that what are the characteristics of good handwriting and what are the defects and what are the causes behind those defects, definitely our learners, our students and the beginners who start writing, they must be needing some suggestions how to improve handwriting. So our teachers can do a lot, they can contribute a lot. In the beginning, we have to suggest use of 4-line notebook and teacher handwriting as model. This is very important. If teacher's handwriting is good, very confidently teacher can say that you have to copy my handwriting. Use of proper writing material. We have to be very careful in guiding the learners or the beginners that the material, paper and pen should be of proper quality, and development of proper posture. Again, I am talking about the posture. Our posture decides our writing slant, our choice of slant, and our movement of hand and movement of our pen. So there should be proper posture, and we have to be careful in guiding the students when they start writing. Then further, use of charts. We can make use of charts showing good handwriting as a model. Then handwriting competition. In our class, a teacher can organize various handwriting competitions, and as well as whosoever writes well must be given awards, so that the child is encouraged and other children also get motivation that if we write well, we also will be awarded, we will be given reward by the teacher. So such kind of handwriting competition can motivate the beginners to write well, because our scoring in the marks also depend on our good handwriting. If the reader or the examiner is not able to read our handwriting, how can one expect that we can secure good marks? So, display of good handwriting can be done. Then the language test. In the classroom, we can organize some language test so that students can learn write well. So, these kind of techniques will be really very helpful for the beginners, and teacher can do a lot. So, after knowing what are the mechanics of handwriting and what are the characteristics of good handwriting and what are the defects, why there is retardation in our students, why they are having these problems, and what a teacher can suggest, how a teacher can help. Now, in the second half, I will be talking to you what do we mean by formal and informal English, because we have noticed that there is the retardation among our students. They do not want to write. On one side, we see that they do not have a good handwriting, and on another side, they do not develop their critical thinking, because we have discussed by now that there is the close relationship between our writing and between our thinking, and there must be a coordination. If our mind is thinking fast and our pen is not, our hand is not making coordination with our mind, then we will be lagging behind in our writing. So, there must be coordination between our writing and thinking. So, I will talk to you what do we mean by formal and informal writing. Both type of writing differ in style and the way we use words to say something. It depends and it differs to whom we are talking, whether in a formal setting or whether we are talking to our close friend. Tone and setting matters. Our tone will be different to whom we are talking, for whom we are writing. So, it is very important that we have to see that our style and choice of words must vary when we are writing for our close friend and we are writing in a formal setting. In academic writing and business communication, formal English is used. In communicating with friends or close associates, we use informal English. In choosing the style of writing, one should keep in mind for whom it is being written. Sometimes, if one is not bothering for whom we are writing, then there is a danger of selecting the wrong word, which will irritate the reader, and it might give the bad impression and can worsen the situation. So, it is my sincere suggestion for the writers that one has to be very peculiar about selecting in writing words, whether we are writing in a formal setting or informal setting. I would like to discuss some examples of informal and formal. Sometimes one becomes negligent in using the word informal or informal setting, and it worsens the situation. Some examples are like, if we are talking or we are writing in a informal situation, then colloquial words can be used like kids, guys, awesome, a lot, etc. These four words can be used in writing for informal setting, but when we are writing in formal setting, we cannot use the word kids. Instead of kids, one must use the word children. Instead of using the word guys, boys word should be used. And instead of writing awesome, if we are writing for formal setting, one must use the word wonderful. Instead of writing a lot, one must write many. And who is not having, if one is not having proper knowledge, then can mix up the informal and formal word, and it creates a bad situation. So, for the learners of language, one has to be very careful in selecting and writing the words in informal and formal setting. Some more examples. In informal setting, you can write can't, won't, shouldn't, but in formal setting you must write cannot, would not, should not. If you are to say I cannot write, but in formal setting you cannot say I can't, you have to say I cannot do ma'am, I cannot do sir. And informal, some more examples. In informal setting, one can write abbreviated words like photo, TV, and the same two words, if I am giving example of photo and TV, if we are writing in a formal setting, one should not use the word photo, one should write photograph. Instead of writing TV, one should write the television. In day-to-day life, who is not having knowledge can mix up the word in informal and formal setting. It also can worsen the situation. So in writing and in selecting the words in informal and formal setting, with these examples, we should learn how to be peculiar in selecting the writing words in informal and formal. Some more examples, like in informal writing, we may use active voice like we have noticed that. But when we are writing in a formal setting, we will not say we have noticed, we will say it has been noticed. For a general person or for a layman, there is no difference in we have noticed that and it has been noticed. But who is having a knowledge of a language, one has to be peculiar about informal setting and formal setting. There is a difference in we have noticed and it has been noticed, because we have to see that we are writing in the formal setting. So, with these examples, I hope it will be a good advice for the writers. Then I would like to discuss about diary writing. There are lot of exercise which a teacher can suggest to the writers how they can develop their creative and critical writing, because these days in digital era, I am not criticizing the digital knowledge, but students or the learners, they are lacking this ability. So we should encourage our students to write daily a diary. So diary writing is a very good exercise which a teacher can suggest, because with this exercise students can learn how to write. And if I talk about diary writing, a diary is a record usually in a handwritten format with discrete entries arranged by date. The reporting is done on what has happened over the course of the day or some period of time. To each and every individual, not to the students, now I am addressing to everyone, that it should be our habit to write daily diary, because it will help us to manage the time for the next day. If for in the previous evening we plan in our diary writing that what I have to do for tomorrow, so it will help us to manage that day. And if it is our habit that at the end of the day we just make entry in our diary what did I do in entire day, so it will help us, and moreover it will develop our writing skill, and it will also help us to manage our time, because in this time when everyone is has to accomplish so many tasks, one has to manage his or her own time. So diary writing on one side affect or help us in developing the writing skill, and on the other hand it helps us to manage our time. So now I will discuss with you what is the utility of diary further. It provides information for the memoir, autobiography or biography. It is written generally for the author's own use and not with the intention of being published as it stands, because sometimes we write this memoir or this autography or biography for own purpose, and we do not have all the time intention of being published as it stands. But some diaries are written with eventual publication in mind, with the intention of self-vindication, pre or posthumous, or simply for profit. Sometimes one wants and sometimes one does not, but diary writing help us to improve our writing skill. Then further, one more exercise which we can suggest to our learners, that is the newspaper article or report writing, because I have been speaking to you that our students are lacking this ability, they do not want to write. On one side they have a bad handwriting, and on another side they are not having critical or creative handwriting habit. A newspaper report follows different sequence from a regular report. If we are to report about some event which occurred or which took place in a school or in an organization, it has its own purpose, and if one is writing for newspaper, it has its own objective and its own style. A regular report describes the events in a sequential manner. A newspaper report is in the form of an inverted pyramid way. First there will be headline, then byline, then date and place line. The first paragraph of report is the lead, which gives answers to the 4 questions: who, what, where and when. So, these 4 W's, who, what, where and when, will be answered. So, there is a different style when we are writing a simple report and or we are writing for newspaper report. Then in the remaining paragraphs, the information drawn from the lead is retold in more detail according to the order of importance. Then the third exercise is the dialogue writing, because our purpose as a teacher is to develop the writing skill among the learners for the beginners and at the advanced stages, and whereas we want that their writing should be good enough and it should have a good characteristics. On the another hand, we want that they have a critical ability or a creative ability. So dialogue writing is one of the exercise which we can suggest to the beginners, to the writers. Dialogue writing or dramatization is particularly well suited for developing linguistic competence and social insight in students of all ages. It is for all ages students. The value of dialogue writing lies, however, in showing pupils how the elements of language they are writing fit together in actual use. The dialogues for beginners should be short, later they can be longer. For example, we are teaching the students at junior classes, we can give them 2 or 3 sentences, 2 or 3 dialogues. First, we can write them those sentences on the chalkboard or the chart or the flashcards, or we can speak in the class and they will write. Later on, as their standard or their grade or their level increases, the dialogues will be longer. In the beginning, we can give them 2 or 3 sentences, later on it will be longer. And then the fourth exercise is the letter writing. When we were discussing about the composition and grammar, I discussed with you that in guided composition, substitution table is of immense use, and when we were discussing the free composition, letter writing is of immense value. Letter writing is a more useful exercise and is called halfway destination between controlled composition and free composition. Letter writing enables us to communicate with people who are away from us. It's a very good exercise. Even in a counseling session and in classes, I daily ask my students that letter writing is a very good exercise. At the end of the day, when we go to bed, we must write a letter, or we must write make an entry in our diary how I spent the day, and it will help us to develop our writing skill, and on the other hand it will help us to organize our next day's task. Then some of the reasons for which we write letters are to inform, to invite, to inquire, to complain, to congratulate, to express sympathy, etc. Various reasons. Every letter has a writer, a reader and a situation. 2 types of letters are personals and business letters. Some of the reason, the various parts of a letter are fixed. The pupils are supposed to adhere to them. Personal letters should be written in a conversational style, and the pupils should be made to imagine the presence of the person to whom is the letter addressed. And if I talk about business letters, they should be of a formal nature, and I have talked to you formal and informal English. They should be to the point. In the end, it can be said that correction of the written work of the pupils is essential as a necessary follow up, because if there is a correction work, only in that case teacher can organize remedial exercises why our students are not able to write. And the last is the notice writing. Notice is a formal means of giving information and of communication. Basically, the purpose of a notice is to announce or display information to a specific group of people. It is a formal receipt of a paper that provides specific information. Notices are generally meant to be pinned upon specific display boards, whether in schools or in public places. And we have to keep some of the precautions in our mind while writing a notice. It should be well written. It should be in a box, it should be in a passive voice, and probably it should be 40 to 50 words presented in a box and should be catching and appealing. And we have to create a natural environment for writing. We need to build our writing program and the classroom environment around the child's need to convey something to a recipient audience. The primary drive to write comes from need to communicate, then experimentation and risk taking is important. Through imitation, they learn well, and background of experiences of the child influence the child's writing. And lastly, children need to be gently led into the arena of writing in the second language. And I believe that all these activities and all these precautions, all these suggestions will help the teachers, always the learner, as well as will help them to make their writing good and to develop in them a love, interest for writing skills.